There is a road leading to Crimea. The Russians used to call it their artery. They moved troops, fuel, and ammunition through here. It was the backbone of their entire occupation. But on the 21st of May, newly released footage revealed something else. A graveyard, burned-out trucks lining both sides, and that graveyard, reports suggest, was still growing, quietly swelling with each passing day. But deeper down that same road, something invisible was hiding. A silent restriction that, according to many military analysts, rewrote the flow of the battlefield in a single night. Hello everyone. Something on the Ukraine front is shifting quietly but decisively. It is not yet clearly visible on official maps, but beneath the surface, the very equation of power is slowly starting to tilt. And this is not a distant story. Each punch landed on Russia's supply lines will eventually echo in your household electricity bill, and in the price of natural gas that Japan continues to buy from across the sea. Tonight, we are peeling back the layers of truth hidden behind a single map. Each layer reveals a completely different picture. The first layer, the road of life to Crimea, appears to have turned into a road of death. The Russians call it the M14 highway. It connects mainland Russia to Crimea, feeding occupied Kherson, Mykolaiv, and the front lines. For weeks, Ukrainian drones and artillery have been pounding it without mercy, according to open-source imagery. Footage from the 21st of May shows destroyed vehicles piling up along the roadside the next day on another supply road, the H20. Video emerged showing Russian trucks under attack. But the real story comes from Russia's own mouth. Vladimir Saldo, the occupation head of Kherson, made a stunning announcement last week: cargo vehicle restrictions on the M14. Think about that. He is telling his own convoys to stay off their most important supply route, only military and essentials allowed. Some analysts argue that this move is practically a declaration of defeat. Even Russian media, in a panicked tone, has reported that the road of life has become the road of death. But that is just the outermost layer. To understand why Russia's artery is being cut so effectively, we need to go one layer deeper. In 26, Putin's war does not appear to be going according to the script he wrote. During the winter, Russia pounded Ukrainian cities, depriving millions of civilians of electricity and water. Then spring came, and they were expected to launch a large-scale offensive. But that spring offensive, by multiple accounts, stalled. Worse for them, Ukraine started pushing back. Not only did they stop Russia's offensive on major axes, but according to multiple sources, they are recapturing lost territory on a considerable scale. On Friday, the 22nd of May, President Zelensky said this in his nightly address. Ukraine's forward positions have been significantly strengthened over the past few months. He gave specific numbers: 590 kilometers, approximately 228 square miles of territory liberated and brought back under control since the beginning of the year. He added that the initiative is no longer on the occupier's side, and it is not just Zelensky's claim. That same Friday, Bloomberg reported on a newly declassified U.S. Defense Intelligence assessment suggesting that approximately 150 square miles have been retaken since February. Just a few days earlier, the Institute for the Study of War, or ISW, assessed that in the single month of April alone, the recaptured area reached about 48 square miles. When you put these two numbers together, something becomes clear. The pace itself may be accelerating. The Economist's War Tracker also points in this direction, noting that the gains in 26 are the largest since 23. However, this remains debated among analysts, as territorial figures in this war are notoriously difficult to verify. All numbers here reflect the best open-source estimates as of May 23, 26, and shift daily with the fog of war. Now, let me give you a sober fact. Russia still occupies approximately 1/5 of Ukraine, about 45,000 square miles. 150 square miles in 45 days is a good start, but the road to reclaim everything remains dauntingly long. Why is it so hard to draw a precise line? Because the front of this war can no longer be captured as a single line. The front stretches over approximately 600 miles. In the year 25, recorded combat engagements totaled 60,605. That averages about 160 engagements per day. The most intense day was the 27th of November, with 311 engagements recorded in a single day. And the spread of drones has fundamentally changed the common sense of the battlefield. From the front line to dozens of miles behind it, Everything that moves has become a kill zone. Both sides have almost abandoned traditional tank-led assaults. Instead, the main role has been taken by small infantry teams conducting infiltration. They push deep into enemy territory, dig trenches, and all their ammunition is delivered by drones from above. That is why, according to OSINT assessments, even in areas where a map might suggest one side is in control, the ground reality remains deeply ambiguous. The gray zone, or the fog of war, those are not just empty phrases. The ISW has listed several broader areas. Since November of 25, Ukrainian forces have liberated most of Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region. From winter to spring, they took back over 150 square miles in the south. Since late April, they have recaptured multiple settlements in western Zaporizhzhia. That is the second layer, a clear turning of the tide happening on the ground, according to most Western observers. But that is not all, because in this war, what is happening on the ground and what is being said are often completely different things. The Russian side is telling a completely different story. On the 21st of April, Russian Chief of General Staff Gerasimov proudly declared that Russian forces had taken 80 settlements and over 1,000 square miles of Ukrainian territory in 26. He also claimed that in March and April alone, they had taken 30 settlements and approximately 270 square miles. But the ISW's rebuttal was almost one-sided. Gerasimov's claims, they said, are not supported by open-source evidence, nor even by pro-Russian military bloggers. Even the most generous pro-Russian estimate, according to OSINT assessments, puts Russian advances since the beginning of the year at only 276 square miles, barely 40% of the number Gerasimov put forward. The ISW's own tally shows that from January to the 21st of April, Russian forces advanced over only just over 100 square miles. The number of settlements they took? 13. And here is the key point. Some analysts argue that they actually lost 2 settlements. Worse, across the entire front. They may have lost 23 square miles. Boasting of advances while possibly retreating, that some observers argue is the true nature of Russia's so-called victory. Gerasimov also claimed that Russian forces had closed to within 35 miles of Kramatorsk and 8.7 miles of Sloviansk. But even the most optimistic Russian accounts, according to open-source data, admit that they remain at least 5.6 miles from Kramatorsk and 8.7 miles from Sloviansk. That said, this remains debated among analysts, as frontline distances can shift rapidly. So why did Gerasimov inflate the numbers so much? The ISW's conclusion is clear. This fabrication is nothing more than a performance to cover up Russia's disappointing stagnation. In fact, in the face of Ukraine's counterattack, reports suggest that Russian forces had already been forced to scale back operations on multiple axes due to heavy losses. They are wasting resources just to maintain the impression of advancing. Losses are mounting, replacements are slowing, even Russia's favorite tactic of wave assaults, some analysts argue, is becoming unsustainable. But that was an assessment from 1 month ago. On Ukraine's battlefield, many things can change in just 1 month. So let us focus the stage down to a single area. Right now, according to military bloggers from both sides, there is only one region where they agree that Ukraine is genuinely advancing: Zaporizhzhia. For the past year, the main axis of Russia's offensive was on the eastern side of the region. They tried to push Ukrainian forces out of Velika Novosilka and inch closer to Orikhiv, the last large town remaining in Ukrainian hands in the southern part. But the real prize, some analysts argue, lay to the west of the region, Zaporizhzhia city itself. There, Russian forces, suffering constant losses from Ukrainian drones, repeated a pattern of stop and go, finally pushing north along the M18 highway. They occupied part of Stepnohersk and approached Pavlivka. But first, Ukraine stopped that offensive. And now, reports suggest that Ukraine is pushing back. According to multiple open-source reports, Ukrainian forces have fully retaken Stepnohersk. They are currently suppressing remaining Russian resistance in Pavlivka. And the next target, more precisely, is Vasilivka to the south. If they take that, the road opens to an important town. Russian analysts are biting their nails over this prospect. What they fear is that this advance might be a setup for something much more serious. What is that much more serious thing? That brings us to the decisive turning point of tonight's report. But before we reach that answer, there is one fact you need to know. Why is Russia's artery being cut? Why is their propaganda being peeled away? Why are they being pushed back in Zaporizhzhia? Now, what follows is analysis based on open-sourced military assessments. Ukraine has not confirmed any operation targeting Enerhodar. Behind all of this, according to many analysts, lies one invisible switch. Ukraine didn't blow up a bridge, they flipped a switch. Starlink geo-fencing, in one night, Russia's eyes went dark. Starlink, the satellite internet network operated by Elon Musk's SpaceX, was built into the heart of Ukraine's operations, from frontline tactics to long-range strike guidance. In principle, it should not be usable by the Russian side, but reports suggest that Russia found a way. They smuggled thousands of illegal terminals and before long became deeply dependent on them. Troop movements, drone control, artillery aiming, all of it, according to OSINT assessments, ran on Starlink. And all of it, according to multiple sources, suddenly faced restrictions in February. A Ukrainian team working with SpaceX introduced geo-fencing. They reportedly disabled terminals operating in combat zones. Those who track frontline reports noticed the impact almost immediately, and now U.S. intelligence officials have officially supported this account. According to the declassified U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency assessment briefed to Congress on May 22, 26, and reported by Bloomberg the same day. Here is an ironic twist. Some analysts argue that Russia shot itself in the foot. As a substitute for Starlink, Russian soldiers had widely been using the messaging app Telegram as an unofficial means of communication. But then, Russian authorities restricted Telegram. Why? Because Telegram was wildly unpopular domestically. It is even said to have fueled public dissatisfaction with Putin's war more than any other factor, losing access to both Starlink terminals and reliable Telegram at the same time. According to open-source assessments, deeply fractured ground coordination, command chaos, severed communication lines. For a while, social media was flooded with complaints from Russian soldiers who had lost connectivity. One soldier leaked this. In a single night, we were sent back completely to the Stone Age. Some have compared this to a black ship shock, just as Japan once realized overnight that its own common sense had become obsolete in the face of steam-powered ships arriving from across the sea. Russian soldiers, the moment that invisible satellite net was restricted, may have understood that they had been left behind. That is one interpretation, though it remains a metaphor rather than a hard fact. And there is a saying, karma. Who tightened the grip on Telegram? It was none other than the Russian authorities themselves. They sowed the seeds themselves and reaped the harvest as chaos on their own front lines. Ukraine, reports suggest, did not miss that moment of chaos. They immediately seized the gap and surged forward. That said, Ukraine itself has not claimed that this was the only factor. Zelensky has stated that the southern operation began 1 month before the decision regarding Starlink restrictions. The Minister of Digital Transformation, Fedorov, has also said that the combination of restrictions on Starlink terminals and the deployment of medium-range attack drones helped tilt the momentum in Ukraine's favor. But this remains debated among analysts, who point out that multiple factors are always at play in any battlefield shift. That is the story of the invisible restriction. But even this, some argue, is just the setup. Time to reveal what some analysts believe to be the real prey. Its name is Enerhodar. Not the towns, not the highway, the plant. The entire move through Stepnohirsk may be a feint around the center to take the stone that matters most. Russian analysts, according to open-source reports, fear this. The advance through Stepnohirsk toward Vasilivka. What if its true objective is to then strike from the east into Enerhodar and retake the nuclear plant? And simultaneously, what if Ukrainian forces cross the Dnipro from the north and launch a pincer attack from the other direction? This is speculation, but some analysts argue that it fits a pattern similar to the game of Go. Instead of directly taking the large stone in the center, you quietly remove the surrounding stones one by one. By the time your opponent realizes there is no escape around the vital point of Enerhodar, Ukraine may now be making such a move. And that move is not alone. On the 12th of May, Ukrainian authorities issued an order for the forced evacuation of families with children from the area around Nikopol, located just about 4 miles from the plant. The official reason is to protect residents from intensifying shelling. But reports suggest that one can also read the meaning of clearing a path for an advance on Enerhodar. And that M14 highway, which Ukraine turned into hell, if you are planning a surprise attack, that road perfectly overlaps with the most critical route for blocking Russian reinforcements. Again, this remains debated among analysts, and there is no definitive proof of an imminent operation. Why is this nuclear plant so important? Stop and think. This is not a distant battlefield. The Zaporizhzhia plant is one of the largest nuclear facilities in Europe, and few people in the world understand the gravity of a nuclear plant being exposed to war as much as the Japanese do. The memory of the 2011 earthquake and nuclear disaster is still engraved in many hearts. The reality of a giant reactor standing just beside flying artillery shells, some analysts argue, is not something to dismiss as someone else's problem. Furthermore, Russia has rewritten borders by force and is feeding the electricity from occupied lands into its own grid. Japan, some observers note, cannot dismiss this behavior as a faraway country's problem, because Japan itself holds 4 northern islands that still have not returned. If the world once permits a change of the status quo by force, that ripple could echo through the seas around the Senkaku Islands and the Taiwan Strait. That is why the unity of the Liberal Alliance, including the US-Japan alliance, may be not just about helping a faraway country, but also about protecting one's own security. This nuclear plant, seized by Russia during its invasion in 2022 and connected to Russia's own power grid, has since become a major obstacle to peace negotiations. Ukraine demands its return, Russia refuses. Third-party management proposals for power sharing have not yet been resolved. So, if Ukraine really is aiming to retake the plant, can we know in advance? Probably not. In war, silence is not empty. Silence means a surprise attack is coming. If Zelensky and Syrskyi say nothing about Enerhodar, that may be the loudest signal of all, of course. At this stage, everything remains speculation. But ironically, the absence of clear signs is exactly what one would expect from an army holding back for a surprise attack. That said, this remains debated among analysts. Others argue that Ukraine may simply lack the resources for such an operation. Let me peel one more layer before we close. Russia's next move, reports suggest that Russia, exhausted but not idle, is stitching together LTE modems, placing relay stations inside Belarus, and trying to maintain drone communications. And on the 23rd of March, the Russian company Bureau 144 launched the first 16 satellites of its own domestically built satellite network, which some call their own Starlink, into low orbit. That is the first step in a plan to have at least a full constellation in place within 2 or 3 years. Clear video images, according to OSINT assessments, are already starting to come back from long-range drones. Will Russia regain the initiative, or will a surging Ukraine sweep it aside? No one knows yet. Here is the essence of tonight's report. What changed the flow of this war, according to many analysts, was not bigger bombs or more tanks, it was quietly restricting the enemy's eyes and ears. Whoever controls the flow of information, some argue, controls the battlefield. That may be the new equation of war that Ukraine has shown in 26. But as always in war, this remains debated among analysts, and the situation can reverse quickly. What do you think? Is the day when Ukraine retakes the Enerhodar nuclear plant truly near? Or will Russia's new satellite constellation pull the map back in its favor? Please share your thoughts in the comments. We will continue to carefully track the movements on this battlefield. Next time, what we report will likely be news of a new phase around that very plant. To not miss that moment, please hit like and subscribe.